There's one way that I can think of that is very similar in going 12-0 and 1-9. And you got to be thinking, what could that possibly be? 12-0, you got a lot to talk about. 1-9, you got a lot to talk about. Welcome into Florida State Seminoles Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here, folks. Leave those comments and questions here. So much to get to. We got Georgitis from the Renegade Report right here with us. George, how you doing?
Man, I've been better. Apologies, I'm not on video for everybody tuning in. I'm at the vet's office, so prayers out for my puppies, see what's wrong with them. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The thing is, when you're 12-0, November is a lot of fun, and you've got a ton of stuff to talk about. October, November, the whole way through. The past 2 months has been hell on earth. Like, it's been really tough trying to spend 3 shows a week talking about Florida State, because you're basically just beating up on them every week. We kept talking about it. We need something to signal a change, something that we could actually talk about. So with these firings, love Ron Dugans, love Alex Atkins, Adam Fuller, they're all great people. But you had to send a signal to the fan base, to the boosters, that you're going to get this thing fixed, and really for us to have something to report on. So now that that's here, and it's a couple weeks, we're going to be National Signing Day, the portal opening, the lawsuits. You got February 5th coming down the line. So super, super exciting, and a breath of fresh air to have some of these conversations again.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, because, this is a job and a situation in the public eye. So this is not like you're running an insurance agency and somebody's not doing their job well, so you fire them. This is all about basically, in addition to evaluating whether this person's a good coach, if it all went south and they're part of the mess, and sometimes it just comes to a place where these guys can still be good football coaches that move on to somewhere else and pick up their careers and have done a good job here at Florida State. But there's a public portion of this. There's a public component that you have to show your fan base that, hey, we are making changes to get better, to move on. And it's just not working right now for whatever reason. We're not going to try to figure it out to the nth degree. Just let's start over. And that's where they're at, obviously, with the dismissals of Alex Atkins, Adam Fuller, and Ron Dugans. I certainly want to give you the room, George, to talk about any of that if you want to address any of that. We did go live with James when that story broke, but certainly if you have anything before we move on to say about those 3 individuals.
Oh, yeah, man, there's plenty of meat on the bone. I had James on last night with me and Jen and Deshaun. And kind of to what you alluded to, these guys getting fired isn't affecting their livelihood. You know what I mean? It's not like, a CPA gets fired and he's got this big mortgage and all. Unless they're living well above their means, they're going to land on their feet. All of them go their separate ways, probably land on staffs and be great. If you look specifically at the offense, that even relates to Mike Norvell. There's all this talk about whether he's going to keep play calling, whether he's going to give it up. If he brought in another Alex Atkins, somebody like that to run his offense, it just, from the outside looking in, it's going to take 3-4 years to get this thing turned around. The biggest thing is to get new eyeballs in there, really kind of just scrap what you were doing and get something new. I think the pressure of 247 on 3, finally starting to call for people's jobs and write those type of articles. It's fine when me and other people do it, but when they start doing it, the pressure's on. If you're FSU's administration, if you're Mike Norvell, you have to look at all these podcasts and platforms and what they're talking about, just hammering you, and they don't understand what's going on. If anything, you fire these guys, and now there's a different narrative. There's something to talk about. There's some hope for the future. And I love Ron Dugans. He's a legend at FSU, one of the greatest wide receivers they ever had, clutch game maker, all those things. So do you think I want to get on my show 3 times a week and denigrate, his ability and what he's doing? No, I don't. But as you said, it's result based, and there's a lot of different rumors about who will possibly come in, this and that. To me, the only possible way that Mike Norvell continues calling the plays, or even going back to the way it was with Dillingham, where it's a lot more 50-50, Mike just kind of has the final say, would be somebody like Brian Hartline, because he's just such an amazing recruiter, and he could get all the, you would have the best receivers in the country within a couple of years if you got Brian Hartline, if it worked. Outside of that, when you're talking about coordinators, I think it's pretty much a consensus amongst most people Bring in somebody, and you're just going to have to let them run the offense. You're going to have to bring in somebody, a fresh set of eyes, get this thing turned around. Everybody's talked about the UNLV guy, Brennan Marion. Love him. He could be a good first choice. One of the more popular scenarios we came up with on the show last night was bring in Mullen on offense and Muschamp on defense. You could almost hire those guys immediately. Muschamp, I don't know if he would, he's probably going to stay with Georgia, but he's an analyst. Like, I don't know about Muschamp because the reason he supposedly took that analyst job was because he wanted to spend more time with his family. I don't know if there's somebody sick, if it was just a limited time. But, names like that come in and you just know they can recruit. They've got a track record. They can coach them up. But, yeah, outside of that, it's tough with a lot of these other names that you're talking about that are up and coming. But it's just exciting, just to have the conversation finally. And the fact that he's committed to changing. He will give up play calling. They did do the 2 coordinators. So yeah.
It's a couple of interesting names you just came up with, and I don't have the numbers, the win-loss records to back this up, but based on just my off the top of my head recollection, most teams that have guys that were successful or at least decent, in their case, you could make an argument how successful they were as head coaches. But anyway, head coaches at a big time level that are coordinators on a football team, that those teams do extremely well.
Yeah.
You've got that much coaching experience and know-how in one room, and you've got 2 guys that they both coached 2 SEC programs in the past as the head coach. Wow, that's a lot of knowledge and experience in one room.
And it takes care of the yes man issue and the not being able to trust in the rumors and things behind the scenes. Like, Dan Mullen isn't going to back down off something if he thinks he's right or whatever. Like, ultimately, Mike will be the final play caller, but he'll go back and forth with him. The same thing as Muschamp. These are fiery guys. These aren't guys that came up that Mike pulled up by their bootstraps, through his career and things like that. Given an opportunity from Charlotte, having Fuller on multiple staffs, it'd be a little different. People want to say that, oh, Dan Mullen, he got fired because he couldn't recruit. Well, I don't know. He recruited, every recruiting class he ever had was better than anything Mike Norvell ever landed, according to the rankings. Now, I will say that, yeah, those last couple classes, he had like 10 guys who were either couldn't qualify or never made it. So those were a little overinflated. But we're not talking about making Dan Mullen the head coach, folks. We're talking about offensive coordinator. What did he do as offensive coordinator? Yeah, Tim Tebow, all that. And, he immediately fixed that offense when he got to Florida. He got AR in there, all those things. So I would be more than happy with him. And I think as an offensive coordinator, not as a head coach that has to divvy up all these responsibilities and be over the entire recruiting effort, I think if you have Dan Mullen as OC and you fill out that staff, like, what quarterback is Dan Mullen going to walk into your house and you're not willing to give it a shot? Pretty good track record.
No, it's a great point. Interesting names right there. Is anybody else being bandied about that you think is pretty reasonable and that you would be optimistic about?
Yeah, it's tough because, people talk about Tino Sinceri, like Joe Craddock from Tulane. Those are all up and coming coaches. I could see it working out, but it's just scary given the situation. Like, I would feel so much more at peace to have a coordinator that has proven it at the highest level, but there's not many of them left. There really aren't. So, yeah, there's a ton of names. I think the most likely is going to be Brennan Marion, just to be totally honest. It's really tough until the season ends,
Yeah, because I think that there are 2 different paths to go on the offensive side, because obviously Mike Norvell got this job because he's an offensive guy
Mm-hmm.
that's been successful. That's his calling card. Most head coaches across the country have a calling card on one side of the football. It takes years and years of great experience at the highest level to where we don't think of somebody being either an offensive guy or a defensive guy. Nick Saban, well, he's originally a defensive guy, but nobody anymore thinks of him as a defensive guy because he's just the greatest coach of all time. Urban Meyer, no longer either offense or defense, just just a great head coach. But most guys, while they're still developing their careers, they're looked at as, well, Manny Diaz, he's a defensive guy. Mike Norvell, offensive guy, etc. So if they hire a Dan Mullen or somebody of that level of status, you would think that he would have control of the offense. Again, Mike Norvell has final veto power versus hiring somebody else that's more of a assistant offensive coordinator, and it's still Mike Norvell's offense. He's still calling the shots, calling the plays, and doing everything. And that guy is just a coordinator during the week and some like an assistant, almost a developmental offensive coordinator.
It's a hard sell, and that's been the biggest point I've made. Like, who's going to be willing to do that? You're going to come try to be a part of a turnaround from a 1-11 or 2-10 team, whatever it ends up being. You risk all that, and you're not even calling plays. That's kind of why at the beginning I said Brian Hartline is about the only person on earth I could see that working. Because they could give him the actual OC title, and you know what he's going to do recruiting. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. The Brennan Merriam one, the why it seems the most likely is because there's a lot of similarities. It's a little different. It's more like Gus Malzahn's offense at Auburn with that spread, but a lot more running the ball. I think it's, in my opinion, the ship has sailed. I think Mike's pretty much ready to give up the play calling, but if you don't get the right guys, like the first go round, the reason the staff is the way it is they missed, like, most of the guys on the staff were a second or third choice. Lanning ended up going here. Silverfield stays at Memphis. There were so many names that we wanted and didn't get that you've got to hope the administration is ready to like really pay up and go get some guys. But yeah, you would like to, as Mike Norvell being an offensive coach, like just go get the most amazing defensive coordinator and let them handle it. But just how far bad this season went and such an anomaly that it was, to me, if you did that, what you just alluded to, like, I don't see how it gets fixed outside of like 2 or 3 years. It's tough to see it happen when you've already seen the initial climb from 20 to 21 to 22 to 23, what it took. And Mike Norvell doesn't have that kind of time. I think it's almost like it's like this. I know you've heard this before. Anytime you're going to train somebody at karate or horse riding lessons, they always say, "I'd rather you not know jack and have no bad habits than you've been doing it by yourself for 3 years, and I got to try and reteach you everything." It's kind of where we are with this offense, man. Like, they didn't have any answers. They couldn't understand. All they could come up with is, well, we misevaluated it. But maybe you could get some fresh eyes and keep the same offense, and they could find the issues. But that process just seems like it would take a long, long time. So I think that's why most people want somebody to come in with a fresh system, learn it from scratch, which principles in football are the same everywhere. But I think you're picking up what I'm putting down.
Absolutely. And you bring up Will Muschamp, and for anybody out there that is of a certain age that maybe they've only been watching football for 5 or 10 years or something in that range, and Will Muschamp doesn't necessarily impress you. Yeah, he didn't have necessarily the greatest run at South Carolina, especially at the end. However, to a certain degree, he had success at Florida, and he had success at South Carolina early in his tenure. But the thing is the guy is considered to be one of the best defensive coordinators in all of college football. When he was on his game and before he became a head coach, he was considered one of the best. You mentioned his family situation. I would have to dig into it to see how old maybe it's a situation, like you said, where there's a health situation in the family, or maybe his kids were getting through junior high and high school, and maybe he's past that and he's ready to get back in there full throttle. I don't know. But that would be a tremendous addition. Again, separate the head coaching record versus the reputation as a defensive coordinator, because, again, he was one of the best.
Yeah, and also with that, an absolute monster at recruiting. I mean, recruiting wasn't ever his issue. He did damn good at South Carolina, and he did good at Florida for those defenses. So, yeah, I could I would love that. It's just kind of tough. It's hard to know, like you said, with the family situation, but I 100% believe they would reach out to him, reach out to Dan Mullen, Both the Indiana coordinators, I can't remember their names for nothing. Tino Sinceri, I remember, but the defensive coordinator, I can't remember his name for anything. He's a candidate. There's not many of those names that are just, known names. There's an offensive line coach from Stanford that people are looking at. It's
I'm
tough.
not
It's
familiar
really
with
tough.
the Indiana defensive coordinator. I just looked him up, Bryant Haynes, but I'm not familiar with his work.
Like there's not many people that are like, and that's what's so tough about this until the season ends. Like they're all retired. Like all the coaches we grew up, the people that have done it and this and that. There's not many people that you can take that is just successful and done it at the highest level that you can bring in outside of those names. So it's tough. You're not gonna. You almost have to do the G5 thing, and that's where it gets into Brennan Marion, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll see.
Derek Mason was an excellent defensive coordinator. Then
Oh,
he
yeah.
elevated to a head coach, and then he ran around to Vandy, and then I think
What's he doing since he lost the Vandy job? I'm not sure.
I think he's at like Middle Tennessee. No. I'm not getting the exact group of five. I'll look him up, but he went somewhere as a head coach. And again, I'm forgetting where he went. Derek Mason is, yes, I got it. I was right the first time. Middle Tennessee head coach. Just this past season was his first year after he was at Oklahoma State, Auburn, Vandy, of course, as the head coach.
Yeah, another name that has been floated out there that I think has cooled off a bit is Derek Nicholson from Miami, Florida State alumni, big guy. Pretty sure the past 2 years he would have jumped at the opportunity to come here and be linebacker coach. But now it's in more of a position, kind of like I said, do you give a guy an opportunity? Do you upgrade a guy from this and that and give him, I'm not sure. The way Miami fans are talking about their linebackers and how they're trending, I'm not sure. But, yeah, that's another name to look at. I would love to have him, but it's tough. It's all on the line. So I guess that's why the Muschamp name is so appealing to me, because I can't think of another name that I would just be like 90% confident it would work out. Unless you're talking about taking Glenn Schumann or something like that from Georgia, but it's not going to happen. So.
Yeah, I've not given it any thought, but yeah, I'll kind of survey the nation here maybe over the next week and see what we come up with. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, everyone. We get together with George each and every Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. It's Georgitis, and it's the Renegade Report. So please get on over there, check out the latest there with all these Florida State changes. And George and the crew got together last night, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So check that out.
My bad. Go ahead.
Go right ahead.
No, I was just going to say, the names are fun, but right now that is really just like kind of wild speculation. You get rumors, you hear from people they've contacted. I know, won't say any names, but I know they've contacted several NFL coaches, had conversations. But to me, and I alluded to it with Muschamp and Mullen, the important thing is kind of the strategy in recruiting when those guys get here. That's very important. This whole way that Mike did it, 3 stars with heart, just get guys that really want to be part of the climb. And, we're going to tell you what's wrong with your game. We're not going to kiss your butt. We're not going to overpay. If some person wants to come pay double market value, whatever, we'll see you later. That isn't going to cut it. Again, we don't have 3-4 years to get this thing right. You've got 2 years, maybe 3. You've got to bring in 30, 40 guys out of the portal and build a foundation with that 2026 class. You've just got to do it. You've got to go get top guys. You have got to change your strategy in recruiting. I'm not sure if you've seen it. We played the clip on my show tonight. There's not very much I agree with how Deion Sanders kind of does things, playing a guy 160 snaps, talking all the crap and some of the stuff they do on social media. Not a fan. The whole the way he talked about Florida State and act like they did him dirty when they didn't make him the head coach, when he never coached anything but high school as an OC. And then like only person that would hire him is Jackson State. So how could you be mad at us for that? Like whatever. But long story short, he came and he said, look, all these guys, the number one class has 28 guys in it. Well, you get to spring and, one season later, how many are left? With the portal, with the ability now to bring 20 to 50 guys in every single year that can play, these same dudes, the bottom 15 guys on your high school recruiting class, you can get them in the portal from a different school with 3 years experience ready to come on the field and play. We saw Florida State do that a bunch, but essentially FSU got zero value out of 5 high school recruiting classes. So to what Dion was saying, if you treat it like the NFL draft and concentrate on getting 10 elite guys, say half of those pan out. Say only they got 5, 4, and 5 stars, like a can't miss wide receiver, a can't miss D and D tackle. If they concentrated on those guys, we'd have a squad this year. So, and that's maybe hyperbole, only signing 10, but they have to focus on the big fish. These 3 stars, it's great. Like they can come, but you can't be wasting a ton of resources and things on them. I really think the combined model is kind of more like the NFL draft is high school recruiting and free agency is the portal. And that's how it's got to be. The rankings don't mean anything to me anymore. You look at Texas A&M a couple years back, Georgia, Alabama, they're consistently in the top 5 of recruiting, but it's not just because they added points. They legitimately got the best wide receiver, the best tight end, the best quarterback, the best, you know what I mean? And even Georgia's 2022 class, how many are left? You just do the math. You sign 25 kids, that's 100 in 4 years. And at the same time, you're taking 20 guys out of the portal every year. That's 180 guys. That's a little bit more than you're allowed to keep on scholarship. So that has to change. They have to be able to keep the Travis Hunters. They have to be able to keep the top guys, the defensive ends, the defensive tackles. You have to have guys that you're bringing them in as freshmen and you're expecting them to be able to play. Not necessarily start, but play and be on a track as a sophomore to possibly be a starter or a key reserve player. Bringing in these offensive linemen that are in their 3rd and 4th year and still can't see the field, it just doesn't work. You can get better guys out of the portal, and we saw that. All of our best offensive linemen were out of the portal. You see what Dion did out of the portal in 1 year dwarfs the offensive line we have at Florida State. So, yeah, if it's not a Jordan Seaton, it's not a Travis Hunter. A Travis Hunter changes your whole team. You know what I mean? So that's what they need to focus on. Where would we be if we got Jeremiah Smith? We'd have at least 2 more wins. I promise you that. We got 30 drops on the year.
Yeah, with all these close losses and a Jeremiah Smith and all that he would add to it, not just the balls that he would catch, but the attention he would draw away from other people. And you just, that's difficult to evaluate, but you just know that it would be significant.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Ryan Williams, any of these guys, there's so many, like there's a couple wide receivers, there's a couple DNs every year that are freaks, and they got to figure out what they got to do to start getting those guys. I can't provide cover for it anymore. I really believe that they had developed who they had. They had all these seniors across the offensive line, senior running backs, loaded D-line, all that stuff. And it didn't pan out. The high school guys just did not hit. This team is 80% high school, and that's why it's so damn bad. Unfortunate.
We're here with you every Wednesday, everyone, 6 p.m. Eastern time. Please hit the like button. Get that out of the way. Please hit the like button and head on over to the Renegade Report. Disputed National Champions, College Football's Historical Reset of the 1990s. Not just a history book. It's much more than that. Check out the link. It's in the description section, and we appreciate Jackson placing that in the chat as well. Check it out. You will enjoy it. All right. DJ Uiagalelei has apparently, according to the report that you cited before we came on, is coming back to Florida State.
Now, I'm not sure if he is 100%, but he is certainly going for that red shirt, and there is a possibility of him returning, which, I mean, if you were to just to guess, even as an outsider or FSU insider, wow, I wouldn't have expected it. But it just makes like with him in that room, how does that affect your ability to bring in a quarterback, portal quarterback, etc.? You've got the two, you got Brock and Luke. It's hard to judge not knowing exactly whatever the injury he had in camp was or what the issues were. At the end of the day, I've not got no problem with him being in my quarterback room. But if Mike Norvell is willing to go into next season with him as his starting quarterback, it's over. He's going to be fired next year.
Yeah.
That's my opinion on it, because like if maybe Brennan Marion gets in and that offense is perfect, I don't know. It just seems like Luke would even be better in that because he runs so much better, but I don't know. It's just tough. What if he gets hurt again? What if this? What if that? I kind of feel for DJU. I can't lie, because I do believe he came in here 100% wanting to make a run and never lacked for effort. And he's been a great teammate and helping out with the clipboard, and he's got an earpiece in his ear. Great kid, great family, and all that. It's just, it's tough. It's almost like with the particular offense, you just kind of want to clear the slate. So we'll see what happens. I was a bit surprised to see that story today. I can't lie.
So either Mike Norvell is going to have the conversation with him to say, you are welcome back. We are hitting the portal, and most likely you are going to be superseded on the depth chart by somebody that we know is going to be the starting quarterback. You have every opportunity in camp to fight for the job, but there are no guarantees. And based on our evaluation of the kind of guys that we're going to go after, you're probably not going to be the starting quarterback. Maybe DJ's thought process is it's a realization that I'm not going to be an NFL quarterback, but I want to do this as a job. I want to coach quarterbacks. I want to be a coach. I want to be involved in this. I like the atmosphere here, and I'm going to learn from Mike Norvell and this coaching staff. Who knows?
Yeah, you read my mind. That's exactly what I was thinking as I was alluding to all that. I could definitely see that. He definitely loves the game, and you just look at the Boston College quarterback. He gets benched for 1 week and he quits. Hits the portal. For DJ to be there, right there next to the coordinators with the earpiece and the play sheet, communicating with the quarterbacks as soon as they come off the field, hats off to him. And the crap he took from me and everybody else in the media, if he's got thick enough skin that he's going to come back, exactly how you said. I hope he's not like they're not holding their hats on him and we keep the same quarterback room. But yeah, hats off to him. If he wants to be a coach, I could definitely see that.
Falconer TRX, thank you so much for the super sticker contribution. Appreciate you being here. And we've got Falconer TRX coming back with this one. He's got, I feel bad for FSU. Football is best with a good FSU.
Ain't that right, man? I'll tell you what. How long has it been since we've had 3 good Florida teams, or even 2 good Florida teams in 1 year? Like, oh my goodness, it's been since the 90s, like the turn of the century.
So, yeah, there was a time, and I don't know exactly how old you are, but I think you're running about 20 years behind me, something like that. Yeah, close to it, where there was a time when I thought, these 3 are going to, not that they're going to run college football, but that's what it was about to come out of my mouth. Something close to that. Like, these 3 are always good. Like, if you start sometime in the mid 80s and you run through the 80s, the 90s into the early 2000s, the thought is, man, these 3 are always going to be good. And I know Miami got hit with probation in there a couple times there in the late 90s, but then they immediately bounced back. But they were on top of the world together for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, you go in the record books and look at national titles and weeks at number 1 and all that stuff. It was them, like, all in the top 5, from the 80s all the way to 2001. So it's definitely been wild. Like, when Jimbo was here, Miami stunk the whole time. It's like Florida stunk the whole time except for 1 year. I think 2012, they had a random good year.
Yeah.
And then now that Florida State stinks, Miami's good, and Florida, it's like, goodness gracious, they can't get it together. I got a couple theories on this. I don't know if it's social media or just the proliferation. I think the most is just I can't talk. The proliferation of college football games being on TV. Like when those three were running things, there was like only 10 teams you would see every week on national TV. Now, like every single game is on. The ability of staffs to recruit nationally has made it to where, and that's one of the reasons you want to get a recruiter in here. It's almost like everybody has equal access to Florida in the entire nation. Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. There was a time when Florida and Miami and Florida State kept all those guys home. If a Florida guy went to Ohio State or Michigan, it was like a big deal. Now, with the way flights and just everything is, it's tough. It's a chicken or egg thing. And Florida State finally they made the egg, and then they broke it. You go 13-0, and Mike Norvell and the staff were putting together a top 10 class, and there you go, back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I would say for the length of time that I've had this YouTube channel and these series of YouTube channels, not going back to when I was covering college football on television, but on YouTube, I should have kept some kind of trajectory map on Florida State, and Miami, because it seems like about every 6 months there's a change in direction. Like for about 6 months, you think, okay, oh, Dan Mullen just got hired. Florida, boom, they took off. He went from 4-8 the year before he was hired to boom, BCS game, BS. He had 3 consecutive BCS bowl games, and they went to an SEC championship game. Oh, they're headed, and then boom, wheels come off. He does a bunch of dumb things. When Mark Richt, boom, he takes over for Al Golden. Immediately, they're better. Then they're a lot better in 2017. And then issues with his son. Now we find out, obviously, he's unfortunately had issues with his health. He's never been the same. And then, boom, he's gone. It seems like obviously from Jimbo being in his prime, national championship, and then another undefeated regular season, really good year in 2015-16, and then Willie can't do anything, and then boom, Norvell comes in. It takes him a couple of years. They look like a train wreck, but then they take off. It's been all over the place for those three.
Yeah, you go back 3 months, and Billy Napier, he's not even the hot seat. He's fired. He's a lame duck going into the season. Mike Norvell makes almost $11 million. Coach of the year candidate, all that stuff. And here we are 3 months later, and it's Napier got extended, and Mike's on the hot seat. One option that that could possibly happen. It's probably not going to happen. But you could always, like, if the hiring process doesn't go whatever, like, he could still get gone. Like, I don't think 60 million even would stop it if they don't have faith in what's going to get fixed. And I kind of forgot the point I was going to make with that, but it's kind of all on the table going forward.
I was just going to finish off our previous recap by saying, and then going into this season, obviously Mario Cristobal had these great recruiting classes, but he was 12-13 his first 2 years. And I don't think still, regardless of how well he's doing right now, that there's an excuse for that, taking over a top 15 roster in the country. But anyway, the roller coaster continues all the way across the board with these 3 schools. Chad, we appreciate you reminding everyone to hit the like button. And George, it must be catching, because I had something I was going to go to as well, and now it's completely out of my mind.
We got the CRS, man. I got a question for you, though. Are you moving to my side of the narrative on these college football playoff rankings, or what?
Oh, in terms of the Big Ten and the SEC getting everything?
Even the Big Ten, if you're not a brand, like if you're Indiana or if you're this or that, you got to work.
Brands.
The biggest thing for me is, like, because the specific conversation we got was kind of resume and all that goes into it. But now we have some pretty clear evidence with Notre Dame and SMU that's insane. Like, it makes zero sense same strength of schedule, better loss, better wins. Like it's SMU in every metric that you can come up with, unless maybe if you looked at S&P plus. I didn't look at those. But to have SMU at 14, the team that's leading the ACC, and Notre Dame at 8, a team who has worse schedules in the ACC because they just play 5 sorry ones and then G5 teams and everything else, service academies. Like it's nuts to me. Like ACC is supposed to be a Power 4 or whatever. So what is the point of anybody being in the ACC? Like, what does the ACC do for you? What does the Big 12 do for you? Nothing. It's just about your brand. You might as well be an independent. And it's even worse than that because basically, if you're in the ACC, you're fighting 17 other teams for one spot. Like it would, unless you just have a miracle 2 undefeated teams in the ACC championship, it's going to be really tough. They're already talking about these SEC teams getting in with 3 losses. I'm sure you saw that thing with Heather Dennett. It's like, it's just tough. Like it's to the point now where the SEC might as well go off on their own and hold a tournament at the end of the year because it's just going to make it so much. Like there's going to be 16, there's going to be 5, 6 SEC teams in, which it's like, what is the point of the regular season? Like it just doesn't seem fair. You can lose a quarter of your games and another team could have 1 loss or 2 losses with one of them being in a title game. And here a 3-loss team gets in that didn't even make their conference. Like, what's the point of even having the conference? You might as well just open it up and everybody schedules whoever the hell they want and your brand carries you.
Well, I'm going to have to see it to believe it that in this scenario with what's being lined up right now, that a 3-loss team from the SEC, unless it's LSU, because they will have to win the conference and they still have a path, but that's winning the conference regardless.
You can't argue with that if they win it. For sure. Can't argue with that one. That's part of it. It just seems like they're really setting up, and we both know that these rankings don't matter. They're just going to do whatever they want on the week of, But the issue is with the narrative and the way the preseason polls are ranked. And if you lose in the SEC, you drop 2 spots. You lose in the ACC, you drop 20. Even though when you look at, top 40 teams in S&P plus and all that stuff, like Texas has a worse Texas has a worse resume than SMU on paper. When you look at the top 40 this wins and all that stuff, that David Hale does a really good job of putting that stuff on. Do I think they're better than Texas? No, but I don't think they're 11 spots worse in the rankings. It's like used to be if you lost to Vanderbilt or you lost to Kentucky and all these things. It's just tough, man. Because what happens is now these ACC teams, SMU and Miami, and you saw it with Florida State, they're not going to get respect for their conference title games or beating Syracuse or whoever they have. And now you have all these teams ranked, whether you think they're too high or not in the SEC. The teams that win those games, they're just set up to get past. Look, we saw it with Florida State last year. They had the excuse of the quarterback. We saw Miami fans, all these people laughing at us. ACC didn't want to step up. They're kind of reaping what they sow now. It's SMU's first year in the conference, so they didn't really have a dog in that fight. But we'll see. We'll see what they do with Miami. They got Miami up there, I forget, 7, something like that now. But if they lose another game, if they lose the ACC championship, no way in heck I see them getting in.
Well, Miami's at 9.
Okay.
So they're just a couple spots away from getting knocked out. Yeah, if they lose the conference championship game. Yeah, that loss by Miami last week pretty much sealed it for the ACC.
Like how is Penn State ahead of Indiana?
Well, you can look at it this way. So you can either go with the team that's undefeated that has game control in all these games, although Indiana played a pretty sloppy game against Michigan. That was the first game that they looked vulnerable. If Ohio State is truly...
Yeah, Ohio State too. Because they played those teams that Indiana blew out close.
One of them. One.
Nebraska. Nebraska, that was a big one.
So Ohio State, okay, let's get back to Penn State. If Ohio State's the number 2 team in the country, then Penn State played them really well. So Indiana doesn't have I know they haven't lost a game, but when you take one of the best teams in the country down to the wire, that's almost a better performance than beating up on 5-5 teams.
Right. But if the roles were reversed, I think it'd still be the same. Because Indiana would have a
absolutely.
loss and they'd be at like 12.
Oh, if Ohio State had Indiana's resume, they'd be 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
no
here they
question.
are with, and that's exactly. And
Yeah,
here they are
strong.
with one loss and they're in the same spot. So it's like, it doesn't even matter if you lose. And it's just like Georgia, people are upset about where Georgia is, but they've lost twice as the number 6 team. Like, I get it. There's Texas and Georgia aren't that far apart, but the games have to mean something. Like, it's basically just it's whoever they think is the best, and it
Oh,
doesn't
yeah.
matter. Danny Cannell had a perfect thing. It's like it's just who they think. If you're going to do that, you might as well just go off the recruiting rankings at the beginning of the year or the preseason poll. It really, for me, I really hate it. I would take the BCS back in a heartbeat. And that move by the ACC to add SMU, Stanford, and Cal, obviously SMU worked out, but you'd be better off with 10 teams and still getting one spot. You'd have been better cutting 4 teams out of the conference, because now you got 17 teams vying for one spot. Meanwhile, a third of the SEC is going to get in,
Well,
it's fine. Like if they're really like, but it's just, I don't know. I just don't like it.
I do think that the ACC has an issue with out-of-conference games. Like, if you look across
in
the
this
board,
1 year, you can use that, but in every other year, Florida State, all these great out-of-conference games and stuff, and it doesn't matter. Like Notre Dame can lose to NIU at the beginning of the year, and that doesn't matter. FSU destroys LSU, that don't count either. So it's like, what's the point of scheduling a good out-of-conference schedule? Nothing.
well, sticking to this season, you've got Clemson gets blown out by Georgia. Miami wins a game against Florida, but what is that worth? It's worth something, but it shouldn't be worth too much. You've got Louisville, one of the best teams in the ACC. They're out of conference game. They lost to Notre Dame. I'm not finding too many
Would you
wins.
have been impressed if Miami would have played Vanderbilt and beat them? Because
Oh,
they
yeah.
beat Alabama.
Sure, I would be. Based on what Vandy's done this year, they've played pretty well. They're a decent team.
500, right? No, they're not. I think we already had that conversation. Maybe they're a little above 500, but it's just, I don't know. The brand doesn't count. That's my point. If you have no brand and you're the SEC, you get respect and you get for your wins. Any other conference in the country, you don't.
What is the best win the ACC has outside the conference?
No, I'm with you. That's a good point. I'm not disagreeing with you there. But again, what's the point? They saw everybody. They see Florida State schedule these games every year, and they don't get credit for them. So everybody, when it comes to the end of the year, that was September. This ain't even the same team. It's like it's just tough. And you've got so many. Like if you lose one game, if you lose that out of conference game, then you got to run the conference. If you lose that out of conference game, you can't lose a conference game. You're not going to make it unless you win it. However you divvy it up, I don't know. Kentucky, South Carolina, Arkansas, yada yada. In the SEC, you can lose to these teams and it's just fine, or play them close and it's just fine. It is what it is.
Well, yeah, Miami also hung on by a thread against Virginia Tech and Cal.
And don't get it twisted. I'm not no proponent for Miami. I'm loving the fact that they're down the ballot and their defense, it is what it is. But I could say that about LSU and all these 2-loss SEC teams too. It would be a pick 'em, I think, if they played. But if that's what you think, if you think the SEC is that much better than the rest of the country, and when you look at the strength of schedule metrics they use, it clearly shows it. Like literally, I can't remember how many teams they have, but it's far and away the SEC team's strength of schedule is on another planet. They just need to separate it. They need to figure something out because you see it in the TV ratings. Like it's tough.
I think the SEC is the best conference top to bottom. I also think it's the best conference from about 1 to 8. I think the top half the top half are the teams we're looking at right here, all these teams with 2 losses. But I do think that the top of the Big Ten can compete with the top of the SEC. If you're just talking about the top 2 or 3. That's
in this year, in this particular year, you probably can't say that about the ACC. But you go back a decade, 3 of the 10 national championships, all the things, you know, and it's still, they don't give them that recognition. And even Florida State, the precedent of what they did to Florida State, it makes this stuff no surprise. No surprise.
There was no situation during the playoff era, during the 4-team, until the Florida State situation where the ACC was left out when they should have been given a spot.
Well, they were undefeated. And, you know, there wasn't a question. They were like, you know, up there. But they never did what they did until they did it against Florida State. And like the year they left TCU out, if that had been Oklahoma, they'd have been in. Like, it's part of it. I think one of the answers would be to put a camera in the room and make them answer it or come up with some kind of something. But like in the NFL, there's divisions that are crap, and they've been crap for 20 years. Every year there's a division that has like all losing teams. Well, guess what? You know, they still get their team, the same amount of teams in.
Sure.
And there's only one wild card. They got to put some kind of limit on it. Like, you can only get 3 or, you know, something like 1 minimum, 3 maximum, something. I get it. You think, you know, the narrative, you think teams are better. They got to figure out some way to make the win losses some way better. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but if you're looking at it, if you're a Florida State or you're a Clemson and now a Miami, there's zero positive to you being in the ACC conference. It doesn't do a thing for you because there's a spot for the top G5, there's a spot for the independents, and 1 spot for the Big 12, and 1 spot for the ACC, just the same. So why not play in the Mountain West? You know, or be independent like Notre Dame, because that Notre Dame one, that's the biggest one. Because truly, you look at the resumes between them and SMU, I don't see how you could possibly say Notre Dame has a better one. I don't.
SMU's best win is Louisville.
I think, yeah, they got 2 ranked ones, maybe 1 or 2.
They beat Louisville. They beat Pitt.
That's right, Louisville and Pitt. I don't know if Pitt's ranked right now or not. They're like 8-1, I think.
So, who'd Notre Dame beat that's any good? They beat Louisville too.
It's almost the same schedule because they play 5 ACC teams and these other lesser teams, but they lost to NIU.
Yeah, they did.
You know, SMU lost to where do they got them? Where they got BYU? Number 6. They lost to number 6 in the country. Now, if an SEC team loses to number 6 in the country, what happens? They drop 2 spots. So it's like, that one's the biggest one. That's the biggest one that stands out to me. That, you know,
I gotcha.
It just doesn't make any sense. And they went up 2 spots. It's like SMU, I believe, was on their bye week, and they drop a spot. Like,
well, that I don't think tells us anything. Teams can win and drop. That makes total sense to me, depending on what else is going on around them. That's teams can lose and they can go up. Now that should be pretty rare, but if you understand ranking resumes, then you can win. And you know, if you're the number 5 team in the country and you beat a horrible team by a field goal, and the number 6 team in the country just beat the number 3 team in the country, should they probably eclipse you? Yeah, they probably should.
There are situations like that. This is not one of them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like, I
gotcha.
How many points does that lost it? Like, I can't put it. I can't finagle it. I don't know where they got it.
Here's my ranking. So
but that looks a lot.
So I've got Oregon number 1, Indiana 2, Ohio State 3, Penn State 4, Texas 5, Tennessee 6. I got BYU 7, SMU 8, spot in front of Notre Dame, Alabama 10, Ole Miss 11, Georgia 12, etc. Now, the other thing that, at least I can only speak for my rankings, there could be like next to no difference, razor thin between 7 and 13 or whatever. People don't always consider that either. And the committee won't answer that question. They won't. Oh, did I knock you off here?
No,
My
I
bad.
accidentally hit back. That's my fault.
Okay.
I could
And
get down with your rankings. That looks like common sense to me.
the committee, the question the committee won't answer until after the fact is they won't tell you how close these teams are. Because again, these teams are extremely close. It's difficult to rank these teams. In many, there's sometimes a clear separation between 5 and 6 or whatever, but many of the spots are just razor close. Now, the committee will tell you after the fact if they moved somebody or they did something, and then you say, oh, well, it seems very strange that they would go from 7 to 4, and they'll tell you, oh, well, they were really close.
Here's what
But
I
they
think
won't tell
happens.
you that in the
They make the
moment.
decision and then they come up with an excuse is what
Yeah, they
happens.
won't tell you in the moment who's
Yeah.
close or where the gaps are. They
Put a
won't
camera on that.
then.
Why not put a camera on it, Mark? Wouldn't that
That'd be
do
phenomenal.
ratings?
Oh,
And you should, another thing, how about not having people that are current athletic directors at schools that are competing at rival schools? You had an ACC guy heading the committee, an NC State athletic director, and it's like, I don't know. Was there any motive for him to not want ACC? I don't think so, but it's tough. He's not a fan of FSU. He's been vocal, talking crap about us over the years. So I don't. It's tough. It's really, really tough. But at the end of the day, still college football. If Florida State was in it, I'd be hyped up, and it's going to be fun to watch it. I just at least bring divisions back. Something they have to have some kind of, at least if you've got 2 division champions, like maybe the Atlantic and the Coastal Division. That gives you 2 teams from the ACC, 2 from the SEC, 2 from the Big Ten. And that makes 6, maybe 1 from the Big 12. Then you could still have 4 at-large bids. It's just the 8 at-large bids. It just seems like no matter what happens, no matter how many losses, this or that, it's going to be tough for anybody outside of the SEC or one of those top 4 Big Tens to get in there. Like, I wonder, it's going to be curious to see what happens if Indiana loses, how far they drop.
well, they're playing Ohio State in 2 weeks. That's going to be their litmus test.
Right, and kind of to what you were saying, if they lose to Ohio State, by that logic, they shouldn't drop anywhere because they lost to the number 1 team unless they get blown off the field.
Yeah, that's going to be their whole test right there.
I
am envisioning a situation where if Ohio State soundly beats Indiana, whatever that looks like to the committee, whether they think that's 2 touchdowns or they got to win by 40, whatever, that Indiana is going to get punished.
Yeah.
And
but Notre Dame doesn't get punished for NIU. You see what I'm saying? Like, how is it Indiana's only 3 spots ahead of a team that lost to NIU? Like, you can beat up on Indiana's wins, but they're all in the Big Ten conference. It's like Notre Dame lost to freaking NIU.
Yeah,
there's 3 spots behind them.
Yeah.
And your rankings, yours is a lot more legit. I love your rankings. Yeah, I could have that seems like an honest, you sat down and you tried to do your best, but it just really feels like those guys
game the entire season, and I keep adding to it all the time, and I put the point differential there so I can judge.
Mm-hmm.
And so
David Hill does a really good job of breaking that stuff down too. So that's a lot of my confirmation has been on his things on S&P Plus and top 40 teams that you've beaten. And when you look at it, as much as people hype up the SEC, there's just, it's a lot closer when you get into the advanced stats outside of strength of schedule. And I don't know what to do about it.
Well, I don't even believe in the whole ranked wins metric because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, it's a preseason.
You're ranking the teams and then you're telling us how many games teams won against ranked teams. You can take any final rankings, AP rankings, and you can find 10 or 15 teams that are outside the top 25 that you can make an argument should be inside the top. Like, there should be no difference between a 9-4 team that got ranked number 23 and a 9-4 team that's like 2 spots out of the rankings.
Maybe they can start ranking 40 teams. It seems like There's
You know what
40
I think
teams that can be in the top 25 any week of the year, depending on one game going one way or the other.
my argument is either like the number 25 is just an arbitrary number. It's just a
Yeah.
made up number. It doesn't mean anything. It's not connected to anything. It doesn't mean anything.
Is it
I
supposed
think
to be better than 26? Like a team that got
yeah,
votes?
exactly. Exactly. And that's why I push against that whole rankings business. When you see the teams down at the bottom also receiving votes, well, they're ranked as well. They received votes just like the teams in the top 20. They just choose not to put a number next to their name. They're still ranked. They still ranked them. I think every team in the country should, if you're going to rank, then do your due diligence. And I think every team in the country should be ranked. And then we would know, okay, a team's unranked, but they're 28.
It's almost like people have talked about possibly centralizing officiating and have it be the teams that participate and are available for the college football playoff. There's a main office and its officials. They send them out to every conference. Maybe you could do that. I forgot again. I forgot the point I was going to make about the rankings. What were you just talking about?
I was just talking about how every team should be ranked.
Yeah, rank them all.
You don't make this distinction over, like I think about a season about 10 years ago in which Michigan State, they had 4 ranked opponents in a row, and each time they beat somebody, they could knock them out of the rankings. So then at the end of the 4 consecutive wins, they had no ranked wins because they beat the teams that were ranked and they knocked them out of the rankings. So it's like, do they have ranked? So if you're looking at it objectively, you just look and you just make a determination. Are those good teams or decent teams? Not, they're either ranked or you fall off a cliff. If you're unranked, you just suck. You're no good. We don't even think about you. But if you're ranked, if you got a 25 next to your name, then you're suddenly good.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And that goes back to my thing with the SEC. They get so much love in the preseason rankings that it's just tough,
Well, George, I got to run. Let us know where we can find you.
It's at the Renegade Report, Tuesdays and Fridays, and then we do the post-game show, of course, right here at FSC Voice of College Football. As soon as we're going to get back to Tuesday, Friday, and Sundays, we haven't been doing Sunday shows because it was just kind of repetitive. We've also got the Renegade Roast on Mondays. But as the season winds up with these coaching searches and recruiting and portal and everything, we'll have a ton of stuff going on. So help us get to 3,000 subs. We're at 2,815 right now. So.
All right, George. Appreciate you being here. Hope everything goes well tonight.
Yes, sir. Go Noles.